Hi everyone, it's Becky here. So welcome to another new video on my YouTube channel, and today I'm taking us all to North Vancouver, to Deep Cove. Yeah, so it's very cloudy in the morning, but I love seeing these cloud forms overlapping and creating a nice dynamic of an atmosphere. Here we're leaving the highway and into the quiet little community of the Deep Cove area. As you can see, the mountain in the distance is looking very misty and mysterious, and I love this kind of atmosphere. It's just more inspiring to sketch compared to a perfect sunny day with perfect blue sky. Yeah, here we are, getting closer to Deep Cove. So we're at Panorama Park, right by Deep Cove. And it's on a weekday, but the parking lot is pretty busy and almost full. Yeah, so Deep Cove is one of the most popular areas in the greater Vancouver area. As you can see, it's so beautiful. And now I've got my very simple set of sketching materials ready. My Etchr sketchbook, A4 size, my sailor's fude fountain pen and 2 Holbein water brushes, my Mungyo watercolor palette. I'm ready to go. Yeah, so I'm going to sketch this lovely view sitting at this picnic table. I'm going to delete the lamppost because it's way too big. It's right in the middle of the landscape. So I'm going to start with the foreground element. This, I think it's a willow tree, starting with the trunk and these major branches, the branches splitting into smaller branches. Yeah, so I think the trunk and the branches of a tree is very important to give that tree energy and spirit. Okay, so these little arms and hands of the tree are sticking out. Yeah, with a lively spirit. Drawing some little twigs draping down. Yeah, so I'm using gentle hand pressure and holding my sailor's fude fountain pen pretty much 90 degrees to the surface of the paper to get these very thin and feathery lines done to define the canopy of the tree. As you can see, it's a very loose and fluffy sphere, and adding some extra branches and twigs sticking out from the canopy, and that's it for my foreground tree. Okay, so now I just drew the bottom line of the aisle in the distance, and there are actually 2 more aisles very far away behind. And then drawing the organic contour outline of the aisle in the middle ground with a lot of these evergreen trees, the bottom. Yeah, I love these bumpy organic lines, and there's a house right there. Yeah, so I think the drawing process is very loose and simple for this sketch. Now I'm just drawing this cluster of a plant in the foreground, the stalks and the loose leaves. Looking around, I'm surrounded by these beautiful different shades of foliage all around me. It's a really refreshing place to sketch and paint. And just keep drawing these loose flowers and leaves on these stalks. And there's another cluster with these flowers on top of the stalks. And these crinkled leaves in between, just summarize what I see. And now I want to draw another foreground element, the bench with a man sitting on it. I think he was sitting there for a very long time. His legs and shoes and a bit of the grass underneath. And I just decided to continue drawing the grass blades on the bottom of these wild flowers, just so it forms a nice frame on the bottom of the sketch, tying everything together nice and organized. Now it's time to tackle these boats. So I'm seeing these boats as very abstract little shapes of trapezoids with little dots of windows in the middle, and these mass of vertical and diagonal lines are very important to give more realistic definition to these boats, and just continue on these abstract little shapes for the boats, and then keep adding more vertical lines and diagonal lines of slightly different heights because these boats are floating at different distances from us. That's why the mast heights are slightly different, and just enjoying the process of summarizing what I see. Now just drawing this gangway or a little bridge taking people to their boats and the land. And just adding these lakes for the metallic gangway. And then there are actually some more stuff around the gangway, like other boats and kayaks. Yeah, these kayak shapes. And another little boat or two with masts sticking up. Now, just adding the foliage and rock texture for this aisle in the middle ground using these loose organic lines showing the folds of trees on top of each other. So I see these trees growing on the aisle are very fluffy and loose organic cone shapes stacking on each other. And then adding some more little details on the bottom of the aisle. Keep it really simple and loose. It does not have to be drawn with an excessive amount of details. My focus is actually on these boats and just the contour outline of these aisles and some fun details like these people kayaking. And my foreground objects, adding some more boats and kayaks in the front. Last little bit of drawing and accentuations here and there. And I think that's it for the drawing part. Yeah, so I'm going to start painting the sky, the pocket of blue in between the clouds unfolding. So this is just pure cerulean blue, loosely spread it out over this triangular area. The little pocket of sky showing in between the clouds, and then just wetting the cloud area with a little bit of clear water and putting on some residue of cerulean blue for a bit of sky peeking through the thin areas of clouds, and then wet into wet. My own bluish gray is a combination of cobalt blue, royal purple, and a tiny bit of green. And the tone of this bluish gray is pretty diluted, and I'm using these lively curving brush marks to show the rhythm and the movement of the clouds. And just adding a little bit more lively cobalt blue. Yeah, so when I'm painting clouds, I like to shade them with a more saturated color than just gray. And a little bit more purplish gray touching the top of the aisles. And that's it about the clouds. Now I'm ready to paint the first layer of the water, just wetting the whole area with clear water and putting on the super diluted turquoise color, which is a mix of cerulean blue and viridian green. Yeah, keeping this first layer super diluted just for the ripples in the more concentrated color to go on top. If you want to show the shine of any body of water, you need to start the first layer with a super diluted blue or turquoise or green, depending on the color that you sense. And the cute Shiba Inu dogs are leaving with their owner. Okay, just adding some final retouches for the clouds touching the top of the aisles. Now I'm ready to work on the second layer of the body of water. As you can see, it's a more concentrated green turquoise, showing the reflection of the aisles in the distance, and a very similar turquoise for the reflection of this middle ground aisle, using thick brush marks, wet into moist. As you can see, these brush strokes are somewhat fading away and not way too crisp. Alright, and my next move is to achieve higher contrast for these reflection areas. I just want to paint around the willow tree a bit more. Okay, time for higher contrast. So this is viridian green mixed with cobalt blue, containing less water compared to before. And these little curves showing the ripples of water is looking a little stronger than the previous layer. And this part is challenging. You have to paint these little brush marks at the right time when the previous layer is not way too wet or completely dried up either. Okay, so now just adding a slightly sharper brush marks in smaller strokes. Okay, next layer, even sharper and dense turquoise colors on top. So as you can see so far, I've done 3 layers for the water reflections, and focusing on rendering the reflection areas only, which is about, let's say, roughly 50% in comparison to the shiny areas. So again, not overpainting. So when we're painting water, make sure we don't overpaint. leave those bright shiny areas pretty much untouched or with just one light layer on top. I spend most of the time rendering these reflection areas of the boats and the aisles, and also the reflection beneath the gangway. Okay, now it's time to move on to paint these aisles. So starting with these warm greens, mostly viridian green mixed with yellow ochre, wet into wet of 2 different values of yellow green. First layer is very diluted yellow green. Second layer, very much just pure viridian green, wet into wet on top, using these choppy brush marks to suggest the growth of trees on these aisles. And these ones in the far distance, it could kind of blur out and not way too defined. Okay, I think I feel like adding more sharper definitions for this aisle here. Wet into moist. The previous layer, as you can see, is not way too wet, and continue using these little choppy brush marks in short vertical segments. Yeah, so I can see in between the willow tree leaves a bit of the aisle in the far distance. Yeah, and painting the lawn area was a bright yellow green, wet into wet, and medium green for a bit of value transition and dimension. Just putting on a bit of yellow ochre for the little bit of land showing, and mostly viridian green loosely punched on for the middle ground aisle. And I'm going to wait for the greeneries to dry off a little bit more before going back to add higher contrast. So while waiting, I'm going to paint these foreground wildflowers using lively greens. So blending 2 to 3 different greens from lighter tone to darker tone. So the bottom of each of these 2 stalks is heavier, giving these 2 clusters a higher sense of volume by being really bold, punching on the dark shade color. And this middle ground aisle, it needs more volume. So yeah, just adding some really heavy weight. In other words, more concentrated shades of green, which is mostly viridian green with a little bit of burnt sienna and a bit of cobalt blue in there as well. Painting most of the top area. The bottom area is a little bit misty, and so keeping the paint slightly diluted. So in my previous videos, I always mentioned that we need to keep a good balance of light values versus heavy values, and I'm showing this idea in many of these sketching situations. And most importantly, you really have to practice on your own to get the hang of it. Now I'm just adding these vibrant blues and reds for the canopy areas of these little boats, using some leftover colors to shade these boats a little bit. They're not perfect paper white, they're partially shaded, and then using leftover yellow ochre to paint the house landing on the base of the aisle there. A little bit of finer rendering for the foliage on the aisle. Very subtle changes of green values. Okay, so now I think this sketch needs more warmer colors, and I'm about to paint the willow tree in the foreground on the left, using these warm yellow greens, containing a really high ratio of lemon yellow, yellow ochre, and just a little bit of viridian green and lime green. So when something looks yellow-green, it's usually more than just one type of yellow-green. As you can see, I'm playing with about 2 to 3 various kinds of yellow-greens for this willow tree, not just one. For the bottom bit, I think it contains a slightly higher ratio of green to create an illusion of a shaded area on the bottom of the canopy. Yeah, so that's very much the first layer, the dance of yellow greens for the willow tree. Now, I want to shade this spherical canopy area with middle to dark greens, mostly on the bottom 50% of the canopy, using leftover viridian green, wet into wet, to create this soft fuzzy effect of fresh new leaves, using leftover brown. For dark sepia, I just simply mix cobalt blue into burnt sienna to shade the branches and the trunk. And at the same time, I'm trying to keep the wash of greens for the willow tree semi-transparent because the foliage itself is really light and fluffy. Painting the man sitting on the bench and some more vibrant colors of red and blues for the kayaks right there to add some highlights and warm colors for this image. And moving on to the final polishing stage, just adding some really subtle little changes of light and shade here and there. And also I want to add a bit more refined definition of trees for this aisle here in the distance. Yeah, so just trying to use these abstract brush marks to suggest the shapes of trees. Alright, so that's it. Here is a look of my finished sketch on location. Nice and peaceful time spent. So it took me about 1 hour to draw and paint this lovely landscape here at Deep Cove. Yeah, so if you want to practice your drawing and watercolor skills with me, you can consider joining my weekend sketch classes live on Zoom. And now it's time to grab a lunch. So this is a nearby Italian sandwich shop and seems very popular. A lot of people are buying, so I decided to try their sandwiches there with my mom. And yeah, so my mom got like a vegetarian style sandwich, and then I got a roast beef one. And the sandwiches are looking really good. It's fresh and including the bread and all the ingredients. Yeah, so I decided to do a sketch before eating. Yeah, so it's actually a pretty large, hearty sandwich for like 15 Canadian dollars. Very good deal. So the sandwich is very close to a cube shape. Now I'm drawing this organic square, the top side of the cube shape, and then the thickness of the bread defined by these lines following what I see and these large air bubbles. Now starting to draw the cheese and the veggies and also the roast beef slices. So when I'm seeing these ingredients, I just see them as abstract shapes overlapping each other, and each of them is actually kind of different. Just let my pen lines to flow over this area of the fillings and some little piece of arugula leaves sticking out. And the bottom piece of the bread is another square, but we can only see the bottom half of it, and adding the last bit of arugula sticking out. Yeah, and some air bubbles. Final little lines, adding the little hills on the top bun over here, and the little cracks. And it's time to paint. So starting the first layer with diluted yellow ochre for the bread. Wet into wet. Yellow ochre mixed with orange in a more concentrated version. And the next color value is orange brown, which is burnt sienna mixed with orange. I also mix in a tiny bit of cobalt blue to get an even darker shade for the bread. The inside of the bread is a much lighter yellow, not paper white. And the color of the roast beef is a mix of burnt sienna and magenta, diluted with a lot of water. The second layer is a little stronger to create a bit of the marbled effect. And then using lime green, mostly these are actually leftover lime green and viridian green for the arugula and spinach leaves, and then red orange for the tomato, as well as the bits of tomato sauce in between the ingredients in very bright saturated red-orange colors. And adding some stronger burnt sienna definitions for the roast beef to suggest the subtle marbled texture of the meat slices. And painting the paper pouch with leftover yellow ochre. For the shadow, I like to mix my own with royal purple and cobalt blue. Yeah, so it's a really lively shadow. And here's a look of my finished sketch. Took me about 15 minutes. And it's time to munch and munch. The sandwich is really good. And if you're visiting Deep Cove, I really recommend this Italian sandwich shop. So after that, I sketched this highland area of North Vancouver with the Deep Cove Community Center on the bottom of the hill and some houses in the middle of the highland. So this landscape sketch really allows a lot of freedom of expression. Now I'm doing the second layer, wet into moist, a slightly darker shade of green and an even darker, really bold shade color of green for these evergreen trees, covering most of the highland area. So I got a cup of caramel macchiato at a cafe and bookstore. I'm just sitting outside to sketch this view. And I had a wonderful day at Deep Cove in North Vancouver. And thank you so much for watching this video, everyone. If you like it, please click like and leave me a comment below. Subscribe to my channel for weekly updates. And if you're interested in learning more detailed drawing and watercolor techniques, you can consider joining my online classes live on Zoom every weekend. And I will see you around in the next video very soon, taking you along to another sketching adventure. It's time to go home in the afternoon sunshine. So have a wonderful day, everyone. Bye.